let's make something a little bit practical. We're going to make a pickup again, and then we're going to make a door, but we're going to make them in blueprint land. So we're going to make a door that works no matter how many of them you place. We're going to make a pickup that works just kind of like what we just did here. But I'm going to give you guys some exercises making, playing a sound and playing a particle effect. Okay, so here's our blueprint for our toggled light. So I can walk up to this guy and press F to interact with this guy. Let's make a new blueprint that is going to be a pickup. So what's an example of pickup in Skyrim that's pretty common, aside from like fruit and stuff? Sword? Yeah, let's make a sword. We're going to make a sword. So let's make a new class blueprint. Again, it's going to be based off actor. And Michael, maybe you want to follow along with this one too. So we're going to make a new class blueprint. You can make it in your maze if you want. So you don't have to make a new project or anything like that. So we can make a new blueprint again, this time based on actor again. And let's make this guy, I'm going to make him the Skyrim sword. If I were to make a real game that's like Skyrim, then I would probably do a lot more to make this thing more reusable. For now, I'm just going to prove that we can do it once, and then later we can talk about how to make this thing reusable. So guys. All right. So we're going to just, I could try to find us a model, but I'm going to make a poor facsimile of a sword. And before, Joe, you asked a question about why is that thing called a root? So we need to make some meshes, but we also need to make them look kind of like a sword. So to do that, I need to make something that is just an empty object that will be my root, so I can move these meshes around. So in your blueprint editor, you can add a scene as one of the components. And I'm going to rename this thing root. So just a plain old scene component does nothing except it just acts as essentially a container for all your other components. And I'm going to try my best to author a broadsword. Yeah, what's up?
And it has its own transform?
Yeah, exactly. So this thing, exactly. So you can scale, rotate, transform. That's essentially what this thing represents. It's a scene. So it has rotation. It's basically a full matrix. So rotation, position, and scale, along with the ability to have other things parented to it.
What was the component that you chose for that?
If you just type scene, you want just a plain old scene, one word. And to that guy, I'm going to add some static mesh components. Michael, so I added a new class blueprint here under this menu. And then in that menu that showed up, I clicked actor. And then I put it in the blueprints folder and I named it like Skyrim sword. And so I'm just going to start adding some static meshes to try to make this thing look broadsword-ish. I don't know. You would normally import a mesh. I don't have a mesh handy for this, so we're just going to do this in kind of a getaway. Just a sword and a tube. Maybe just I'm going to add a macaroni noodle for my crossguard, and then I'm going to add another static mesh for the actual blade, which can be a cylinder. And for the cylinder, I can rotate this thing here, and I can scale it down. It's going to be like the worst sword I've ever seen in my life. I'm not trying to make anything phallic here, so. All right. Do you like this terrible thing that I'm doing? This terrible representation of a sword?
We really good sword with a lot of damage on it.
Okay, that's going to have to do for now. Okay, I did all that just so I could have something representing this thing in the world. This is going to be our pickup. So we can, I can take this sword that I have now, I can place it in the world. If this was one mesh, we could actually give it physics, which would be nice. The problem is that this is all separate meshes. So what we can do is I can parent this guy to here, parent them all together, simulate physics on this guy. And I think if I do this right, I think they'll all fall together. Yeah, I'm not going to bother with physics. Disregard trying to add physics. Okay, so I just have a sword there. So kind of like how we just did with the light, we can add a pickup box. So if I just go and add a box, this is going to essentially represent the collision shape that is where you stand to pick up this thing. And I'm going to make it a little bit taller so that you can stand on top of it. And you don't have to be like exactly on top of it to make it work. So we're going to do essentially the same thing we did with the light, where we're going to have the trigger volume enable input so that you can pick it up, and then it's going to show some text. So I might as well add the text now. I'm going to add text render. Press F to pick up. And I can make this guy
Where is this? Oh my god.
speak English.
Sword that I just made. Where'd you get that from? Your thing that you did.
Which thing? The noodle?
No, the whole thing, like the whole sword.
I just made it.
I know, but like where is it now? Where did you put it?
Oh, I just dragged it into the level.
I can't do that.
You can, I have the sword here.
Oh, well. Okay.
And so what I want to do is essentially the same thing we did with the light. So you actually already just did this, so I'm just kind of running through this as fast as I can. But the key is that I want to play a sound and an effect now when I do this. So let's set it up so that I go to my box and do exactly the same thing you did with the light. So you're going to have a bunch of overlap events. And here, there's going to be an overlap end event. And I'm going to enable input. Oh, that's right. You do get player controller first. And on this guy, I'm going to enable input. If you're not sure what to do, just look at your toggled light and just copy paste that guy. Copy paste the nodes from one to another. Like so. And then when I press the F key, I can just destroy the actor. And I'm also going to show that text when I walk over it. And maybe I can try to do something cool, like actually show it in game, like replace your hand, replace your gun with this thing. Why not? And then I'm going to also take my text here. This is exactly the same as what you should have just done already in the light. Toggle visibility in both cases. Okay, so you should have, I'm going to give you guys some time. You should have this thing where if I get close to it, the text shows up, press F to pick up, I press F, and then it gets destroyed. Okay. This is the entirety of the blueprint. It's exactly the same as the light, right? So I want you to take the work that you did on the light and make it work for this sword. And then we'll add a sound, and we'll also play particle effects when you pick it up. I'm going to take this box here. I'm going to make it slightly bigger as well. That way I don't have to get like absolutely on top of it. And then I can put a bunch of these swords around.
Well, the thing is, I don't have the sword. I'm not sure how to, how do I lay it down now?
Just drag it into the level.
Like,
No, you have to take it into
like it's separate pieces, so I'm not sure.
drag the blueprint into the level.
But don't I have to put the box and all that stuff around it too? And just do that in here still, right?
So no, that's fine. Oh, that's how I do this. I did it. Alright.
Okay. So
Just drag this guy into the level.
and then that'll rotate it back in there.
No, this is an instance of that guy, so you can duplicate this. You can orient him however you want. So yeah, if you rotate him here, this guy is essentially like is a blueprint. It represents like what the thing could be. You can do all your scaling and rotating here. You just converted scale there.
Okay. So
Now you set up all the blueprint script like you did the light.
But there's not a way to like combine all those pieces so that I'm, because like to add it, because I'll just be picking up one piece at a time, right?
No, you are picking up the blueprint is all
The whole blueprint. Okay,
Yeah.
I keep
You
forgetting.
can't actually move each piece individually in the level. Oh, did you do the light? Do you remember the what is your light look like? Yeah. So yeah, it's exactly the same as this.
Oh.
So that's why I want you to figure it out. How did you actually add the overlapping on the light? You need to have the box selected. Right. Once you have this, maybe Joey, you can hook up play particle effects and play sound. When
Wait,
you pick
so
it up.
my box is just a box, right?
Yeah, it's a trigger box though. It says box, but it actually is a
Okay.
trigger.
I wasn't sure if it understood that or if I had to explain that to it.
And you do have to have the box selected if you want to do overlap effects. So yeah, you did that right.
Oh, I did, right?
Mhm.
It says box. But I'll probably do it again.
Yeah, because that one is not the box. So that one will work. And then we'll translate this into a door that is a blueprint. Sorry, this is not a 3D editing program. It would probably be faster just to make it in Maya and import it. So.
Why is the first box?
Oh, so the first box is because he is the root. You cannot edit the root. If you want to be able to move something around, what I did is I added a scene as a dummy object for the root. So you should do the same thing. So add a component, add a scene. Just type scene in. That third one. And then drag that guy on top of the current root. Now that's the new root. Now you can move that back here. Because everything was parented as that. Everything was in the space of that.
How do I get this over into here then? Or So what you want to do is go to the blueprint for the character. So go to the example map and go to my character. So this guy's just a blueprint like anything else. So you go to components, go to his components. And he literally is that with a gun, right? So what you can
Hammer
do,
with arms.
so you can do is you can attach that sword blueprint to one of the. You can attach it to one of these things here. So what you can do is you can add a new component here as a scene. I like to use scenes just for like attachment points and stuff. Just move it into position. This can you can rename it as well to be like
Sword place.
yeah, exactly. And then move it into place. You can use a visual. Yeah, unfortunately, I think the gun is part of the first-person mesh, but it doesn't really matter in this case. So
Okay.
what you want to do is from the sword, you're going to essentially drill down and find that guy, and you're going to attach the sword to that position. So you have to go to your blueprint for your sword pickup. No, it's good. I didn't want to be doing here anyway. So when someone begins overlapping with you, that other actor is going to be that blueprint that you were editing. So it's going to be my character. So what we can do is we can take this other actor and drag a wire, and I want you to type cast. So this is going to convert this thing into a character. So type cast and then put space and put my character. No, you want that guy. Cool. So now what you can do is this is going to represent the current guy that is standing in the trigger box.
Okay.
And that is that thing. So if you drag a wire from as my character, oh, you need to do one more thing. So go back to the character blueprint, and go to the graph. We're going to need to be able to grab that sword piece. So in order to make that be visible to other blueprints, I need you to click on the sword place and compile. Okay, he might already be accessible. Okay, so now that you compiled, it should be fine. So go back to the sword pickup and drag a wire from the character and type sword. You'll find your sword place. See that hit sword place? So this is actually that scene component that you grabbed before.
Right.
So what you can do now is we're going to save off that thing. So we need to create a variable here that's going to save off that sword. So create a new variable. And I want you, this is going to be the target sword, I guess. Yeah, target sword is fine. And change the variable type here from Boolean to type, if you type scene, you want scene because that's what that is.
The object reference.
Yes. You're going to save it off. And then I want you, here, I'll show you a trick. You want to drag that target sword into the scene. And you want to set, yeah, you can just you can just let go in the blank area, type and do set, and you're going to set the target sword equal to that thing that you got. So connect this guy, so that variable plugs into the variable input there, and then you connect the execution wire. What you're doing now is essentially saving off where the target's going to be.
Okay.
And then after you press F here, after destroy actor, I want you to drag another wire off destroy, and I want you to type attach. You want to attach actor to component. Cool. The target is going to be the target sword, so you can just drag that on top of target. Drag it into the scene first. Yeah, and then type get, and then try connecting that to the target. Actor. Okay, so it is an actor. What we need to do is get the parent. So yeah, type, drag a wire target, what we need to attach is, we need to spawn a new one of these swords, and we're going to need to attach it to the player. So what we need to do now is, in between here, drag the execution wire off to an empty space again, and type spawn. Spawn actor from class. And so the class is going to be your blueprint for your sword. So in that drop-down box, you should be able to find your sword. Sword pickup.
Off of their feet.
And then the return value plugs into here.
To this stuff.
Cool. That's right. Sword pickup has a cross-off compiler there. Go back to the sword pickup. Let's see compiler. Oh, spawn transform. You can say where the transform is. Just drag a wire off backwards from there, and just do make transform. And that's fine. Just do zero transform. You just need to double this up on the sword compiler.
No, not what I have done.
So it's probably attached, but I bet you it's in the wrong place. Flip around
Be
here.
like looking behind.
Yeah, I bet you it's like, I don't know what it was. SSC. It's probably in the wrong place. So close this. I'll come help you in a minute. Christian. Go to the sword pickup again. You want to change this drop down box to snap to cover.
Should try it then.
One more thing, let's try. So go back to the sword pickup. In this, delete this make transform. And can you drag this into the, can you drag the target sword into the scene again? Yep, into get. And I want you to drag a wire from there and type transform. We're going to find world transform. Get world transform. Plug that into transform there. We're going to spawn this thing where the socket is.
Right. Okay.
And see if that fixes it too. And the only other thing I can think of is that we're actually spawning a pickup in your hand. So we're spawning the same thing that's on the ground in your hand, which includes like the trigger and everything. So instead what we probably want to do is spawn a separate blueprint that is only the
Just
sword.
sword.
Yeah, no trigger or anything like that.
Okay. And then do I need to compile it each time, or?
You don't need to compile it if you just add nodes. You do need to compile it to the third place.
Okay.
I just get into the habit of compiling all the time because I'm never sure.
So there is nothing at the
Yeah.
wall there.
Hey, I did it.
It is creating something.
Putting it over there.
Yeah.
0, 0.
Yeah, so let's, I want to do, we'll do a breakpoint. So, because I want to see what's actually happening. This spawn actor, BP sword pickup, I want to make sure it's actually destroying actor. The parent is maybe that. I wonder if this destroy actor needs to happen after everything. I'm worried that it's destroying everything, which means it's also destroying the variables. So
Not getting through.
yeah, exactly. So try disconnecting it. You can alt click to disconnect the shortcut.
Very cool.
And as the last resort, we'll just debug it.
Over there.
where the here, and here, and there. It's all in the things.
Okay, so then
It's just
stop.
yeah.
This is there.
Yep. That goes to, you can connect that one to
Yeah,
there.
this one goes actually here.
Probably explains a lot of it. So then we'll try that. It's gonna hit your breakpoints though, so keep them in the
Something in my way.
There's something there. I think it's scale. Did you scale those things down when you placed them?
definitely did.
Okay, so that sword is just rotated incorrectly.
Thank you.
Yep, you can fix that. That's not that. You get your pickup working now?
Yeah, but
That's not the game. That's the game.
Cool. Okay. Let's do more with that. What about you, John? You got it working?
Yep, I'm good.
Michael?
I didn't put the text because it's a pain in the ass. And I didn't like it.
You get your
I found where the text was, I don't know if it was in the box.
oh, so just add box. Just add a photo for box. It's a trigger. That's what this thing is. Yeah, I don't know why they call it a box, because like, I mean, it represents a box, but it actually behaves like a trigger. Cool. And then yeah, if you go to your graph, you can click on that guy and add overlap to that approach. So now if you go to your blueprint graph over here, you can click on your box on the left, and then right click here and do overlap to that. And it's going to be a very hard because yeah, those component again on the end, that's what you look up to actually destroy the reactor and show it. Okay.
Next. Let's make some additions to this guy. So he gets destroyed when you press F, but we can easily have it play a sound as well when you destroy the actor. So if you want to do anything like play a sound or even play an emitter, so let's just play a sound to start. If you just search for play sound at location, you can pick from a variety of different sounds to play. Let's play this one. I'm not sure what this actually sounds like here. Huh.
That's how I pick up stuff.
All right then. I'm going to make a sound because I'm all about this. If you go to bfxr.net, you can just make sounds. It's a lot easier to get the sound that you want. And it even has like a button for like pickups. That sounds great. I'm going to export that as a wave to my desktop.
What's this website called?
bfxr.net.
bfxr.net.
Yeah, and so it just gives me a wave file, which is perfect. And then I can just go to my Unreal, and I can just drag this into my content browser. And it imports a sound for me, which is now my pickup sound. Cool. And I can use that here instead because that's way more relevant. Bam. And the location I want to play it at is actually going to be at the location of the pickup. So I can drag a wire backwards from here, and I can type get world location, and I can get the world location of the root.
What about get actor location?
You can do that too. It's essentially the same thing. So now I added a sound, right? And you can do things like also, if you want to, play an emitter at the same location. So the emitter I can play is, I'll do an explosion.
So even though the actor is getting destroyed, it's still continuing with blueprint script?
These are one-offs, so it will destroy it on a next tick. So you can run some scripts, but I always worry because if a script is like longer than a single frame, like, hey, wait for 6 seconds, that wait will never happen if you destroy the actor. But these will happen because they happen immediately after I destroy it in that same frame. Let's see how the, let's say the explosion's not playing. I want to make sure this is actually auto-destroy. The sounds? If you want to play a sound, drag a wire and do play sound at location. And then in the drop-down box, there's a bunch of sounds you can pick. But then if you go to bfxr.net, you can make your own sounds. That bfxr.net is actually required for if you want to enter Ludum Dare, because Ludum Dare requires you to make all your own content. Yeah. So this guy. See this error message? Yeah, bfxr.net. See this error message, Joey? I can't do that. So I can't do that in this case because it doesn't know what the root location is. So I can do get actor location.
Okay.
This might also fail because I think that because I'm destroying it, I might just have to change the order. Oh, that actually worked.
I think I've had the most fun with the sounds.
The sounds are the funniest part, yeah. Make sure you pick one. You can import it by dragging and dropping it.
Destroying everything.
Yeah, so if you just import it into the content browser, you'll just be able to play it there. Okay.
I was gonna say Bean Night. Oh, what? Bean Night. Never mind.
How about we make it rain swords from the sky? We can do that too.
Well, now you're just getting crazy.
Because might as well. I mean, they are objects that you can create. The only problem is, I think if I play this guy, he falls, or like one of them falls, but like none of the rest of them fall. I need to set up the physics of these. The problem with setting these all up as separate meshes is that they don't really have proper physics on any of these things. I think if I do this, and then unsimulate physics on these guys here. Okay. Yeah. So I think I can combine them so that thing falls. Okay, cool. Text didn't fall. You're right. I will attach the text to the mesh and the box too. Yeah, you can parent up. If you have multiple meshes and you want to set up the physics together, parent all the meshes to one another. So like parent static mesh 2 and 3 to parent static mesh 1. And everything should be parented to static mesh 1. And just enable physics on static mesh 1. And that'll combine them all together. So that when you it still works. Yeah, I think it's actually yeah, that one didn't explode.
So when it's falling though, you pick up box. That's the static mesh.
It won't move with the static mesh.
Okay.
Because this thing is simulating physics, but the physics is actually tied to
The
mesh.
box isn't parented right now?
well, now it's parented. I parented the box to the so I wanted to make this thing fall correctly, right? So I checked this simulate physics box on static mesh, and then I just attached everything to that static mesh, which meant that when the static mesh simulates, everything moves with it. And so what we can do now is we can make it rain broadswords from the sky. So I'm going to pick a spot in the level, and I'm just going to look for, I'm going to place a target point over here from basic. I'm going to drag it up into the sky here. And that seems like a good enough spot. So what I'll do now is I'll go back to the level blueprint. So in this case, I could make a blueprint actor that spawns these guys. So I'll show you guys how to do that next. But I'm going to do this first in the level blueprint, and then I'll make a class blueprint for it. So I'll go here, and all I have to do is maybe I'll bind it on the H key. So when the H key is pressed, I'm just going to spawn an actor from class. And the actor I'm going to spawn is my Skyrim sword. And the transform, I'm going to click on my target point here. and go back to my blueprint in the level, right click and create a reference to it, and then drag a wire and do get world transform. Like that. And so now when I hit H, broadswords are raining from the sky. It is like Skyrim. I'm like picking up everything. Oh, the explosions, we can fix the explosions also not playing too, because the explosions are based on the actor location, and the actor's still in the sky, technically. So all we have to do is we just have to rearrange these things here like this. And instead of playing this from get actor location, I'm going to play this from static mesh. Like so. I'm going to get the location of the static mesh component, and I'm going to put those before I destroy the actor, which will make it so that when I go to pick up the, when I rain broadswords from the sky, some of them are falling through.
And you just did that in the world blueprint at the level?
That's I did in the actual broadsword blueprint. Okay, so just to review, I created a target point in the level. It's one of these things here. And then I went to my level blueprint, and all I did was when I press H, spawn an actor as a Skyrim sword at that target point. Okay. Can you guys do this too?
That's in the level blueprint.
This is in the level blueprint, and I'll show you how to make this into an actual spawn blueprint next. But yeah, you should have, make sure your sword is set up to simulate physics first.
So I open a little blueprint?
Yep. Yep.
Oh yeah, then.
Yeah, make step mesh 1, like drag everything to be a child like that.
How do I parent thing?
You just drag it on top of step mesh 1.
Oh, there you go.
You didn't want to do that. Yeah. So try what you just did before. So expand the root.
Oh, okay.
Click on step mesh 1. Yeah. Yeah, you want to do that. And then same thing here. Can I attach static? Is this, click on that guy again. Show me step mesh 2. Try turning this on. On step mesh 1. Click on the sky. Just click on it. Yeah, see any static? Make it movable. And drag it over. And then click on step mesh 1 and scroll down to where it says physics and do simulate physics. Now if you do simulation physics, you should fall. Yeah, close enough. Cool. So make that and now make this in a level blueprint.
So first we need to make
Make a target point. Yeah, just respawn that just on top here. Yeah, and then in that drop down box where it says class, you can
folder.
Move.
There's a tile folder.
Move that.
And then try that again. Okay, something was screwed up with your project. Hit Control S for me real quick. And then close this blueprint editor and reopen the level blueprint. And try spawning it again. Okay, something got broken. Okay. Open up your starting source blueprint. Right click on that guy. Let's see what it is. Okay. I'm gonna have you just close down and reopen it. It's not your fault, it's just that something happened with it. It actually affected the blueprint again. Oh, it's gonna do it.
How do you spawn the actor?
There. So you just connect it to type. You want to add the spawn actor function,
Yeah.
and then in a drop down box where it says class, find your blueprint that you made.
So I'm just gonna add the spawn. What?
Spawn actor from class.
Okay. And then, but it doesn't have. Oh, class. No, I select.
Yeah. Find the sort that you made.
I'll go to blueprint. What is this madness?
Delete the spawn actor and then try again.
What's that?
Finish that one and then right away. Spawn actor. Class. Try searching for DIR underscore. I think it'll find that. It's a bunch of spellings. There's your light blueprint. How did you do good? If you do this for me, we're gonna do a different way. So add a new variable. I just want to prove that it works. And name this thing sword. Yeah, and then in here, I want you to type, like, click the top of that, up here on the type stack. Sword. Type class. That will click touchable. And I want you to drag this on top of the class. Yeah. Okay. You should never have to do that, but that's one way you can implement it. And then make it spawn at the key point, the turning point that you think is spawn.
Wait, I thought it took the
Oh, cool. Okay, so go to the components for this guy. And then go to stack type 1. And then scroll down and enable base physics. So physics.
That's it.
And then parent stack type 2, stack type 1. So parent actually everything is stack type. You got parent the other classification. So just drag down that text. So you need to find 0 type domain. And then tile.
So I'm gonna
Stop
do
for a
it.
second.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're good. That's it.
How does it
Just place
stop
the target
the
point
game?
on the level.
It doesn't actually stop the game. What do you have to set up? Well, I just know the time still didn't go to 0.
You need to place one of those things in the level down. So you have to actually place some
I wouldn't do that.
where you want
Well,
to
it's just
spawn.
like,
Gotcha.
Because if
Oh,
the
okay.
time 0 will go down 0 and then like menu will come up or it'll go down to 0.
Okay. But like usually what I just do is also like a invoke element. Like invoke this, which would be to load a different level.
Yeah.
Set it for like a 5-second delay, so we kind of like keep running. And after 5 seconds,
So
just
you need to
relaunch
create
it.
a reference station first.
Well, in that case, the game over.
So you
Yeah.
with a light.
I don't know, I never looked at the time scale.
Right click. In the blueprint.
What do it do?
Click
Oh,
there.
scale.
You
Like
know how to
so
do this.
it just scales like how much time passes. Yeah, so you can do like 0.5 and then everything's still zooms and you put it back to one. And
Okay.
Golden
And then
speed.
plug in the spawn transform mode and spawn function.
how did he do? Like, I drove it Iraq, so guy. Oh, he just disappeared. Yeah, just I would destroy the rocket right now.
And now when you play it, it will spawn.
It needs to explode. Like a nuclear explosion, yeah.
It needs to be like microwave frozen.
With the lens flare.
With the lens flare.
That's the biggest part.
What if you want on the right side with jump
Yeah, you need to
down?
I would, I'm gonna have it, this, right now this guy's too small, I can just go underneath it. But for my player that I'm making, I'm gonna have it so you can like duck under stuff.
And just
So you'll be able to duck right
see the
around the
character,
sides.
but only enable physics for static mesh 2. Static mesh 3 and 4 does not have physics there.
You should do is you should make it faster over time.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do at some point. I was gonna
Or
do it.
faster on
And
the
I would
amount
parent
of coins you
static mesh
collect.
4 to static mesh 2. So they're
I was gonna add coins.
So like just have a counter every time you pick up a coin. It increases that and then at like 10, 20, 30, 40 it gets faster.
So it increases every 20 days, is it?
Yeah.
No.
I thought you said it was easy, man.
So I changed
also
it.
lost
I have it set so I can change like cause what happens is off school prefab spawns, and then I have like a breather sets one that doesn't have an off school on it. So I had it for like does like 3. So
Oh.
but
Did it
I
get to
changed
work,
it
Christian?
now to 1.
No, it
So
doesn't
now there's
spawn.
only
Doesn't
2
spawn?
in between each one.
Did you get everything?
So that was another way I was gonna make it harder. Like once my
Okay,
space
that's right.
was gonna
And
change
is it
it,
in the
make
air?
it so there's
Are they
less,
spawning in the air or they're not spawning?
Room in between.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you get like a certain time, like say
Okay,
if
so
I
it's probably
if I
because
step
that
out
was
the word, then you change and then it's next game harder.
So let's go back to your level blueprint.
Yeah. I was gonna do that. I was gonna do that and
That thing that
the
we did
speed.
here. Yeah. Can you make this window bigger?
Johnny
or
never came
stop
into
it?
that other class, did he?
Main one?
No, I didn't. I specifically looked when I went back in there, I looked for him and he
It wasn't there.
wasn't.
Yeah, I bet it's still gonna be my fault.
Oh yeah, of course. It's the programmer's fault. It's always that's what everyone blames, programmers.
Did you scale this guy?
Game
up?
sucks. It's programmer's fault.
I don't think so.
So I think because it's spawning with the default it's spawning with the default size.
Okay. Okay. Is it making a little bit more sense as to why a class blueprint is better or different than a level blueprint as to why it's useful? Like you can make this sword and you can make the sword kind of do whatever you want and you can spawn as many of them as you want and that behavior is the same.
Become their own guy.
So, you know in Skyrim there's not just one sword obviously, there's like variations of swords. There are swords that are like a broadsword but maybe it's enchanted, right? So it has some kind of magic enchant on it. We can have that same kind of concept. So, like you take any RPG, right? Like any game that has like a regular sword, you might have a fire version of that sword or like an enchanted version of that sword that does more damage. So we have one sword in our game, but we can make variations of that same sword super easily. So maybe we want the swords that we spawn to be the broadsword, or maybe we want to be the fire sword, but we all want them to act like swords. We did all this work to make them able to be picked up, right? We don't want to have to duplicate that work every time we make a new sword. If I asked you guys to make like a flaming broadsword, then you would think that, oh, maybe you have to copy paste that work. Well, you don't actually have to do that at all. So what you can do is if you go to your blueprints, and we're going to make another class blueprint here. And this time, when we pick our blueprint, you're going to pick a new parent class that's not one of these guys. So under all classes, you're going to click this little box down here. It's going to expand this list here. I want you to type in your Skyrim sword. You're going to make this guy be the base. This is essentially like the template, and then you're making a variation upon that template. So we're going to use the Skyrim sword here as our new template. And I'm going to name this guy Skyrim Sword Enchanted. And when I made that, now my new blueprint looks exactly the same as my other one. Only now I can do cool things, like I can attach an emitter, or I can attach a particle system. That's fire. Onto the sword. Everything else is the same. Notice I can't translate any of the meshes. The meshes on the left here are from the original broadsword. But I made a new one based on that, and I can't change those, but I can add my own behavior to it. So I can parent this fire to static mesh 1. And now when I spawn, well, this is what the old broadswords are doing, right? So they're spawning these things. But if I want to spawn my flaming ones, that still I can pick up. All I have to do here is change this from Skyrim Sword to Skyrim Sword Enchanted in the level blueprint. And now when I play, spawn those guys. Those guys are on fire. And I can still pick them up. And everything is the same. Okay, I feel like I lost some people, so I'm going to do that again in a different way. So I'm going to make another new class blueprint. This time I'm going to make like a smoke sword. So I'm going to make a new class blueprint.
The dreaded smoke sword.
Yeah. See here in this window here, can you guys read the, look at the relationship I have. I have Skyrim Sword, which can be my new parent, or I can make it based off the enchanted one. So I can make a fire enchanted sword that has more stuff on it, or I can make one based off the base class version of that sword. So I'm going to pick the regular Skyrim sword. BP, the dreaded smoke sword. So I can go in here and I can add another particle system. Notice it doesn't have the fire on this one, right? But I can pick and I can do smoke on here. Maybe I can do steam. Yes.
The dreaded steam sword.
Oh, you want me to yeah, it's in world space. So does this make sense what I'm doing as far as like spawning that? Those are all the same sword. All the work I did for making them interactable is still there. Everything I did, right? But it was super easy for me to make a variation of that sword by just making the parent be different. And if I want to, I can spawn randomly between them. Okay. Do you guys can you guys follow along with this? Can you make did you already make a variation of these swords by chance? Okay, so let's just randomly. This will be the last thing that I do for today because kind of ran out of time, but it's fine. The last thing I want to do is spawn from my list of swords. I'm going to make 3 total swords, or maybe 4, because I'm going to make another one. Because I have my enchanted sword and I have my smoke sword, but I'm going to make a new one that is a spark sword. And then I'm going to, every time I hit H, you know how when you kill an enemy in Diablo or like you open a chest, it's kind of random what you might get? Well, let's do that same kind of behavior every time you hit H. We'll just randomly spawn one of these things, right?
Skyrim was like, ooh, Iron Dagger.
Yeah, you guys like shitty things all the time. So here I'm going to pick sparks now. Here's my spark sword. So follow along with me here. We have 2 ways that we can do this, and I'm going to show you, well, let's just see that this thing works to start. I have all my swords here. Let's just spawn my spark sword here. There's my spark swords. Oh, I didn't attach them correctly. Gotta make sure that these things are attached to static mesh 1, otherwise they won't work. Some of them will land. There we go. So let's first make it so that I can make a different, I'm going to make this guy into a sword spawner. Okay. I mentioned that this is all in the level blueprint right now, right? So if you open up your level blueprint, this is kind of like what it looks like. We can make it so that we create a blueprint that lets us spawn swords whenever we hit a key. And then we could just duplicate that blueprint everywhere we go. So every time we hit a key, it might spawn a sword for every one of those spawners. So make one more final blueprint. And I'm going to make this thing, let's call this guy, this is going to be the thing responsible for making an explosion of loot. If you ever played Diablo, anytime you kill like a boss, they like explode in loot, right? So we can make something that does that. This time, make a new blueprint based on actor. And I'm going to call this guy the loot spawner.
Ludosaurus Rex.
The uber looter. I'm going to call this guy the loot spawner. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a billboard to this guy. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to add a billboard so I can see him in game.
It is a Ludosaurus Rex.
That is a dragon, actually. It's a Ludosaurus dragon. Did you see the pictures of the Tyrannosaurus Rex that they say have feathers now? He has like wings instead of little arms. You guys haven't seen that? It like ruined my childhood.
The dinosaurs have been screwing everything up for so long now.
This is what T-Rexes look like now.
They're birds.
They're birds.
That's dumb.
Yeah, they look like.
What's that based on? Like they just now like started finding.
Yeah, apparently they discovered that dinosaurs had feathers. Like, well, they kind of knew to derive off birds, but they look more like this now. Like even their tails. That's what it was.
Reptilian freaking chickens.
Yep, that's what it was.
Well, for now it's the birds. Next year it's gonna be something else. Or next decade.
Oh, by the way, this is I believe this is the Velociraptor.
It looks warm.
So less cool. It's so
warm and cuddly.
Yeah.
Watching be like, no, they have feathers.
You don't understand. Don't you get it? They're all wrong.
They show them all like the dinosaurs when they started making a bunch of changes to them in the last few years. They made them all like neon pink and shit.
Yeah, they're glow in the dark
In
now.
the movie, they were spliced with frog
Reptilian frog. Yeah, so like they don't have feathers.
Frog DNA.
It's true.
I'm still pissed about the Brontosaurus. My whole childhood.
Oh, it's not a Brontosaurus. It's a
the
Brachiosaurus.
was this like big, long-necked dinosaur. Now they don't even exist. It's not even real dinosaur.
Well, there's a Brachiosaurus still.
Yeah, but it's not a Brontosaurus.
That's true. There's no such thing.
Was the dinosaur.
No, they made a mistake. It tends to happen.
That bugged me out a lot. That was my favorite dinosaur, and now it's not even real.
Yeah, it's sad. You ever go to? You should go to Walking with Dinosaurs if you ever go to Anaheim.
Not real?
The Walking with Dinosaurs, they have like a scale brachiosaur that goes all the way to the top of the Anaheim stadium. The place where they play, where the Ducks play. I don't remember the name of that stadium. What's the name of? Is it Angel Stadium? Not Angel Stadium. Anyway, yeah, they basically. Yeah, it's a Honda Center. That's right. The brachiosaur they have goes to the top of the Honda Center. Like it reaches the top. It's pretty crazy.
Is that just like a temporary exhibit or something?
No, they comes every year. So like,
I'll have to do that this year.
yeah, Walking with Dinosaurs. Have you gone to it?
When I was little, and they had the one with the dinosaur ripping the head off the other one.
Oh, really? That's cool. The brachiosaur was really cool. That was my favorite part. It was just so super tall. Okay, anyway, back to loot spawner. We're just gonna finish off with
Is
this.
this all part of the video, this whole little conversation?
Yeah, this is all part of the video, so you guys can watch it.
That's what I was just, like, I was going over the homework.
Make sure I'm recording.
The last week's assignment.
Yeah.
And you'll be like talking and then it'll stop for like 20 minutes.
Yeah. While I go off and help. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I
like
have-
was saying.
I have a wireless mic, but I don't have a webcam. I'll bring in a webcam so that you guys can at least see whether.
Also, like the right part of the screen.
Yeah, that's fixed. Sorry, it was clipped. It's gonna be fixed in this week's video too. All right, so we have this loot spawner. what I want this loot spawner to do is that when you press a key, it's going to do exactly what we just did in the level. So we're going to set it up. I'm going to show you how we can do that easily. So I'm going to do another, in the blueprint, I'm going to spawn actor from class, just like I did before. And this one, I'm just going to have it spawn the enchanted sword, which is a fire sword. And this time, I can just right-click and do get world transform, because I'm in the blueprint for the loot spawner now. I can just type get world transform, plug that into here. And I want to set it up so that when I press H, it spawns a guy. But remember that by default, we need to tell the game that we care about the input. We need to enable or disable input. However, there is a workaround you can do if you don't want to go through all that, where if you just want to press a key at any time, you can do that. There's two different ways you can do that. One, just on, instead of doing it based on trigger, just on event begin play, you could get the player controller, and then you can call enable input. So instead of doing it with a trigger, you could just do this. Okay? You could do event begin play, which means when this blueprint starts, they immediately enable the input for the player controller, which will make it so when I press H, it'll spawn that guy. So this is the entirety of our blueprint script for a loot spawner for now. And then I'll show you guys how to expose things so you can edit that. Okay? So I'm going to go back to my level. I want to delete my existing spawner that's in the level because I'm going to place this blueprint now. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to delete all the blueprint for the level spawner. I'm going to delete this key point now. I'm going to go and place my loot spawner in the level. And I'm going to place 2 of them, maybe 3, maybe 4. I'll do 4. So what do you guys expect will happen when I press H?
4 swords should drop out of those locations.
Yeah, 4 swords every time I press H, right?
Oh, but there's no spawn of swords.
There's only one.
What we need to do is we need to enable input so that every one of those has the ability to spawn the sword. Let me just make sure I did this right too.
So the name different, only the one that does have a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, it's this thing here, you know, this thing should be working for, hang on, let me make sure I actually did this right.
Because the other ones are copies.
No, that shouldn't matter. I think it's because this enable input, this is why I'm going to show you the other way. You can do things this way where on start it enables the input for this player controller. Or you can click on the defaults here. If you just don't want to care about doing this ever, if you just want it to always enable input for that player, you can just delete that guy, go to defaults, and here in the input settings where it says auto receive input, just select player 0. It's still only 1. Make sure I did this right. It actually should be spawning it for everyone.
And now on that auto receive input, that's specifically for this blueprint.
That's exactly. It's for this blueprint, and it basically does what I just did, where on event begin play you enable input. Yeah, it's only for one of them. Why is only one of them working? Well, it's the sky. Let's see here. Auto receive input for 0, for 1. Let me try dragging 2 different blueprints in here. Because what I want to have happen is a loot explosion for multiple types every time I hit H. Yes. Yeah, this is not supposed to, actually, I bet you this is actually a bug. Because in different versions of Unreal, this definitely worked. I think it's because it only is processing 1 key at a time. It's not supposed to do that. That's okay. We'll work around this. Hopefully there'll be, I'll look it up and see if there's something wrong with the key handling, because it should be that all of these things are able to handle keys, but we'll just stick to 1 loot spawner for now. That's fine. So I have my loot spawner. here. And currently, this type of sword that's spawning is always the fire sword, right? If I want to change the type of sword that's spawning, I have to go into the blueprint and change it here. But that changes it for every version of that loot spawner that I have. What if I want to change it for different ones? This example doesn't really work well without having multiple versions. What I should do, I'm trying to think of a way to make this work properly. Yeah, I'll bind one to, let's see if this works. I'm going to bind J to this as well. Yeah, they're all still on the one. Okay, let's make it so that when I walk under these things, it'll spawn one. That'll probably make it easier than making it so that I have to press a key, because that doesn't work right now. That's actually really a shame. I'm going to add trigger, so you walk under one of these things, and it's going to spawn a sword above your head. Might as well. Let's go here. Let's go and add a box.
Sounds really dangerous.
Like a sword above your head? Well, as long as you catch it, it'll be fine, right? So I'm going to make this guy big. And as soon as someone touches this thing, I am going to spawn a sword. So instead of on H key, I'm just going to select the box, and on overlap, that's when I'm going to spawn the sword. Okay. So I have these two spawners. I'm actually going to make them visible in game as well, because I want to see where the billboard is. So I'm going to click on this guy and make him not hidden in game, so I can see where the volume is. See, I can stand under here. Aha, and then it's an infinite loop.
Now you figure out how to make a shower.
Yeah, so what's actually happening is that it's spawning, every time I go in there, it's spawning a sword, which is then spawning another sword, which is then causing the loot spawner to spawn again, right? So what I want to do is I want to make sure that the thing that's overlapping with it is the player. What's nice about this component begin overlap is that you get this player, you get the thing that's overlapping with you here. You can tell whether it's a player or not using this variable. So what you can do is you can say, hey, drag a wire from the other actor. This is the other guy that's currently touching me. And I can cast him to a character. This is saying, hey, see if the other guy that's touching me is a character. Specifically, my character is a special blueprint that's created. That's the first person guy with the arms. That's what this guy is. And what I can do is, if that works, I just plug that in between here. And now we'll only spawn one if the character is the guy underneath the box, which will stop it from doing that infinite loop. So I did that, spawned a spark sword. I did that, spawned another spark sword. So I have two spark swords. What if I want one to spawn fire and one to spawn sparks? Currently, if I want to change the type of sword that spawned, I change it here. But now they're both going to spawn the same type of sword, right? So I walk under here. That's a fire sword. And I walk under here. That's also a fire sword. If I want them to be different, I can expose what type of sword to spawn by right-clicking on this guy. And I could just say promote this guy to a variable. And I could say sword to spawn. And promoting it to a variable means that, hey, instead of always picking the same type of sword from one of this list, I can change the type of sword that spawned to whatever I want per loot spawner that's in the level. So each loot spawner gets its own type of sword to spawn. And the way you do that is you click on this guy that's editable, and you go down here. And in the properties for this, including the name, there's this editable checkbox that you can check true. And now, when you have that true and you compile, you go back to your level and you click on your spawner. Look on the right here. See how now I have a drop-down box? And each one of these guys has its own drop-down box for which type of sword. So this guy, I can spawn the spark sword. I can make a third guy that spawns the smoke sword.
Can you make it so that one guy will spawn 3 different things?
Yes, I can show you that next. So you mean randomly pick between things? So here, this guy will spawn the smoke sword, that guy spawns the spark sword, and this guy spawns the fire sword, right? So each one of those can change. They're all the same spawner. It's just I'm changing what to spawn. The nice part, it doesn't even have to be a sword, because this is a generic spawner. It can actually be anything. So if I wanted to say spawn, I don't know, what did I create earlier? Like a toggled light? I could create a light here instead. If I walk under here, bam, there's my light that spawns too. I can turn it on and off. And every time I walk under there, it's going to create more lights. So like, it doesn't have to be a sword specifically. This thing can be anything that you want to create, right? Okay, so let's show you guys how to make a spawner that makes 3 different types of swords instead of just one that you pick. Because currently I have, hey, always pick this kind of sword to spawn. Instead, what I want to do is I have a list of possible, like we do this in Diablo. It's called a loot table. You guys might be familiar with the concept. You kill an enemy, and it randomly picks within the loot table what item to spawn, if any. And what we're going to do is make a fake loot table. We're going to essentially make a list of possible swords to spawn, and then it's going to pick within that list what to spawn.
Can you set the likelihood of each?
Yes, we can do that next. I'm just going to make it 100% between all of them to start, and then we can change it so that it's random.
Well, there's a variable there.
Yes. So I have this sword to spawn. What I want to do is I want to change this thing from an actor to an array. An array is just a list. I want to change this thing from one type of sword to a list of different types of swords. Unreal does not let you edit the variable while it's already placed, so I need to delete all instances of it first. So I'm going to delete this guy. And now I can go here, I can click this little box, and what that box does, it changes it from one variable to be a list. And now here, in the bottom left, there's a bunch of items I can add. This is the loot table you're making. Can you see that, Michael? Yeah. So in here I can pick, here's my regular sword, here's my enchanted sword, here's my spark sword, and then I have one for the smoke sword. So there's my loot table, right? So I have 4 possible things that can spawn. And so what I can do is right before I spawn it, I can pick one randomly out of that list. So I can drag, this is just a variable like anything else. I can drag him into the level. And I wish that there was some way to get a random guy out of this list. But instead what we can do is we can get a single thing out of that list. So going back, this is a list of 4 items, right? And look at the numbers on the left here. This is the index. This is the index for each item. So the regular Skyrim sword is at 0. So what is this going to return here? The regular Skyrim sword. What is this guy going to return?
Whatever is 1.
The enchanted one? What is this guy? What, 2 and 3, right? So yeah, it's going to go down that list. So that list number here represents which item in the list I'm going to get, right? So just to prove it, I'm just going to get 2, which I think is the spark sword. I'll just plug that in here. Okay, I'll compile and play. So what I would expect is that each of these is going to give me a spark sword, right? Cool. Well, instead of just a hard-coded 2 here, we can make this random, right? We can randomly pick between 0 and 3, right? Because all the possible values are 0 is a regular 1, 1 is the fire sword, 2 is a spark sword, and 3 is a smoke sword. 4 has no meaning. 4 doesn't exist in this list, so 4 won't give us anything. So we can randomly pick. So I'm going to drag a wire. Instead of just typing hard code, I can do random. I can get a random integer in range. And I can go from 0 to 3. And then I can play. And every time I walk under here, it's going to randomly spawn a different sword. It might be the same sword sometimes. But you can see it is different. Like there are different swords that are spawning smoke and whatever. Right? Cool.
And there's only 4 options, so you're going to get a lot of the same.
Yeah, so what we can do now is we can add a condition. Like you said, you're not always going to get loot. You'll have some percentage. Give me a percentage of chance to get a sword from this thing. 32% chance to get a sword?
So that's pretty low.
78% chance? That's pretty high.
You get the regular sword?
They're all swords.
to get any sword, just to start, and then we'll filter it based on
Let's go
type.
50-50 for any sword.
Okay, 50-50 for any sword.
5%.
So how do you do dice rolls in real life, right? If I said, here is a D20, okay, I give you a D20, and I want you to tell me how you figured out whether you solve that you have a 50% chance to evade. What number do you have to roll to get a 50% chance to properly evade on that dice? Like, you have to roll higher than what number?
It depends.
I give you a D20. What number do you have to roll higher than to achieve a 50% chance?
Oh, higher than 10.
Higher than 10. Okay, what about a D12?
Higher than 6.
Okay, what about a D1?
Higher than 0.50.
Or 1 or 0, right? Yeah, higher than 0.5, or a D2, I guess. A two-sided die, which would be crazy. What was that piece of paper? A coin, right? So either heads or tails. So if I gave you a 10-sided die, and I said, what number do you have to be higher than to give me a 10% chance to get something? What number do you have to be higher than for a D10?
1.
If I'm higher than 1, will that give me a 10% chance? So if I roll a 2,
Oh, no. Less than 1.
less than 1, or higher than 9. Right? Does that, so either of those cases. So that's essentially what we're going to do. We're going to roll a dice, and then we're going to take that number, and we're going to convert it to something that makes sense as far as percentages go. Okay? Only the dice we're going to roll is a like 100,000 sided dice. Or we're going to make, maybe we'll make it like a 10,000 sided dice, just so we get some precision on here. So what we can do is here, the first thing we need to do is we need to branch. And you guys use branches already for the keys, right? This branch here will determine whether a sword should drop or not. Okay? This says, hey, if a sword should drop, go ahead and spawn one. Otherwise, don't do anything. That's what this guy is going to be responsible for. What is the condition for this?
Did you make a variable?
Well, I'm just explaining in English. What is the condition for a sword dropping in our case?
True or false statement.
Yeah, and what is that statement made up of? What actual statement needs to be true?
It has to be over 50%.
Yeah, I have to roll a die, and that die has to be half the time I'll get a sword, right? That's actually what the condition is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a random, I'm going to get a float. That's kind of weird. Random float. I'm going to type random float, and I'm just going to do a random float. This thing returns a value between 0 and 1, an infinite number of values between 0 and 1. It could be 0.1. It could be 0.76432, whatever. What number does this have to be greater than in order for us to give 50% chance? 0.5. So if this number is greater than 0.5, that's a 50% chance. What would be a 10% chance? 0.9. So a 10% chance to spawn a sword is here. So if this random float is greater than 0.9, I have a 10% chance. That means that I have a 10% chance to spawn a sword. If this number is greater than 0.5, I have a 50% chance. What percent chance is this? 90% chance, right? What about this? 99% chance. Okay. Or this? 0.01%. Right. So I have a 50% chance.
Programmers of the math.
So I have a 50% chance here. But does this make sense, John, as far as like what we're trying to do here? So there's a branch as to whether or not we should spawn a sword or not. Okay. So only 50% of the time will it spawn a sword. Didn't spawn a sword there. Didn't spawn a sword there. Didn't spawn a sword there. Am I really missing out? There's one. Okay, that's like 2 out of 5.
Self-love.
But you get 3. Yeah, so you have a chance of spawning a sword randomly. If I made this thing 0.9, I would only have a 10% chance of spawning a sword every time I walked under there. Okay, I got one. It's like the it's like a lottery. 10% is pretty good.
You need to like start a baseline, but 10% is pretty good.
Well, technically it's 30%.
Yeah, 30% because I have 3 chances. Yeah, it's not really 30%,
Yeah,
but it's
10 or 3 separate.
yeah 3 separate. It's still 10%, but I just have more chances to do that. Okay, but so that is essentially how we would set up a list. So we can always add more swords to spawn here in the lower left as we make them. And all we have to do is change this value here to increase it. There's also a way you can change it, so if you don't want to have to type in that value, I'll show you anyway. You can just drag a wire and do length, and just plug that guy into here. That'll always give you the right one. Or actually, it's length minus 1. You can take this guy and subtract 1 from it. But it's easier. You can do this, or you can type this thing in and update it every time. Okay.
Yeah, but the other way is better for the artist. Like if they want to add a sword.
Yeah, if they want to actually have multiple ones. And what's cool about this way that we did it here is that we have each of these spawners has its own loot table. That's the final step. Is that this guy has a loot table of all these swords, but we can make it so the middle guy only has noodles and no sword or whatever. Like this guy. I can get rid of that entry here. Delete that entry. So he only has 3 possible swords. And if you want to change the percentage of how likely it is that that particular loot spawner will drop something, what do you have to do? You go here. This number here is our percentage, right? I can promote to a variable, a chance, probability. I'll just call it probability. And then I can make it editable. And now when I go to my blueprint, I can change per loot spawner, I can change the number here. This guy has a 90% chance to drop. This guy has, it's kind of confusing because it's reverse. This guy has a 50% chance to drop, and this guy has a 0.99% chance to drop. But he has a chance to drop all the magic ones. This guy, 50% chance to drop, can only drop either the regular sword or the or just the fire sword. And this guy has a 90% chance to drop, but he only ever spawns regular swords.
And noodles.
You want him to spawn noodles?
Yeah, you should probably spawn some noodles.
We have to make a blueprint for that.
Oh man.
It's okay. It's really fast. No, it's really fast. Just make a noodle. Just make a noodle and just add a static mesh. Just go here and just find a noodle. There you go. Simulate physics. Done. Okay, so then we can go here and then we can type noodle. Now he spawns either sword or noodle, right?
I like this game.
So I walk under here. This guy has sword.
Where's all the damn noodles at?
Give me a noodle. Here's a noodle. Yeah. Oh, so keep in mind that because, okay, so that's another reason. Even though we changed the loot table, this thing's always trying to pick between 0 and 3.
Oh, there's 4 now.
Yeah, or some of them only have 2, right? So you need to do this thing here where you need to get the length. And the length of this is 4, so we're going to subtract 1 from it to get 3. And we're going to plug that in here. So now we'll get the proper 50% noodle distribution. So now when I walk under here, there we go. So that guy spawns noodles or swords. This guy only has a 50% chance to spawn a sword, but it's a fire sword. And this guy only has a 10% chance to spawn, but he spawns any kind of sword. This is exactly what MMOs are basically all about. This is me grinding the box to try to find the epic loot.
That's hours of work right there.
This is
This is like weeks for those raids.
This is true.
Iron daggers so you can up your blacksmith skill.
Yeah, this is essentially what games have boiled down to for like games like Diablo. I've just distilled it down to you walking back and forth outside of a box. But essentially, this is what you're doing. You're like, oh, I didn't get my drop today. Well, maybe I'll get it next week. Nope, not this week. How about next week? Nope. 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 Eventually, I'll get this drop. There's only one thing that can possibly drop. I can't believe I haven't hit it yet.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Did I put 0.99? Is it 1%?
I think
I think it is.
It is 0.99. I didn't want it to be 1% chance to drop.
Pretty much no chance.
It's like, that's essentially like, yeah, that's essentially no chance.
You
Like,
have as much chance of getting pregnant.
no, I have slightly less chance of getting pregnant. I think the chance of that is 0. There we go. I got my. This is like farming. Like what is it? The coins in Destiny. Okay. Okay. So that's it for today. Everyone's here. Give out the homework.